What up, YouTube? Here with a post-fight video of the Shakur Stevenson versus Artem Harutyunyan fight. Now, before I give y'all the summary of what happened in the fight, I'm going to tell y'all the results first. Shakur Stevenson was able to retain his WBC lightweight title via unanimous decision victory. And this was a one-sided clinic, a good performance on the side of Shakur Stevenson. And that's me being positive, and I say that because this performance was yet again criticized, because Shakur Stevenson in the past, we've seen him put on much more dominant performances than this fight versus Artem Harutyunyan. And Shakur Stevenson, leading up to this fight, did say that he was going to put on a much more entertaining, thrilling performance than he did versus Edwin De Los Santos, where he did say that he wasn't at 100% when he fought De Los Santos for that WBC lightweight title. And that fight, and Shakur Stevenson won that fight, however, was heavily criticized because of a boring fight that he put on that the fans were not too thrilled about. And Shakur Stevenson did a lot of moving throughout the fight versus Edwin De Los Santos, and it wasn't the same in this fight versus Harutyunyan because he was more active than he was versus De Los Santos, and he threw more punches and displayed his reputable attributes, and that's him displaying his good technical skills that he's known for. And Shakur Stevenson is a slick defensive fighter, and he displayed that through his movements and his ability to read his opponent's shots and offense, for him to block and dodge his opponent's attacks as he did versus Harutyunyan in this fight, and as well as Shakur Stevenson's ability to pick his opponents apart, create different angles, control the pace, control the movement, and showing good ring generalship skills in this fight versus Harutyunyan, and as well as his accuracy and punch placement. And Shakur Stevenson did a good job going upstairs and downstairs and staying consistent throughout the entirety of the fight versus Harutyunyan, as well. He has made himself a reputation for knowing to do. And I don't understand a lot of the criticism coming from the fans with Shakur Stevenson's performance in this fight versus Harutyunyan. Now, granted, it wasn't as of a dominant performance as Shakur Stevenson has put on in the past versus better quality opponents. For example, when he fought Jamel Herring, that was a classical dominant performance on the part of Shakur Stevenson, which was the fight that really put Shakur Stevenson on the map to be considered a top 10 pound-for-pound elite amongst the whole sport of boxing and not just in the lightweight division. And Harutyunyan isn't as a well-known, reputable name like a Jamel Herring or like the likes of a Robson Canseco and Oscar Valdez, who Shakur Stevenson put on a dominant performance versus against those names as well. And those names are well-recognizable names amongst the sport of boxing. And Shakur Stevenson put on a clinic like he did versus Harutyunyan versus guys like that, Valdez, Canseco, Herring, and so on and so forth. And Shakur Stevenson, he did a good job walking down Harutyunyan throughout the fight, closing the gap between him and Harutyunyan. And Shakur Stevenson's ability to fight from any range is an impressive skill that Stevenson possesses. And it seems to be a conspiracy against Shakur Stevenson. And I say that because you look at social media, there was footage of Shakur Stevenson in his hometown, Newark, New Jersey, where this fight was being hosted at, and in his hometown crowd, I don't know if it was after the fight or during the fight, but you saw a lot of fans walk out from the arena. And Shakur Stevenson also has said on his Twitter that it seemed to be as if there is a conspiracy against Shakur Stevenson to make it where his stock market is going down and fans are turning their backs on him, and that they're trying to build Shakur Stevenson to be this boring guy. Now, granted that Shakur Stevenson, I can't say this, and this is to be fair, and I can't say Shakur Stevenson didn't take risks, because he threw a lot of punches throughout the majority of the fight, and he stayed consistent while doing that, and his game plan was well executed, and his work rate was consistent throughout the whole entirety of the fight, other than the first 2 rounds, which were the only rounds that I had gave to Harutyunyan, and the rest of the round was Shakur Stevenson. And Shakur Stevenson, it's not fair that he's being considered now to be a boring fighter. I think it's because we've seen Shakur Stevenson put on dominant performances where he executed TKOs and was able to stop his opponents, and he's not doing that as of late. And granted, this was a better, more entertaining performance on the side of Shakur Stevenson when comparing this fight versus Harutyunyan to his fight versus De Los Santos. And Stevenson, I think the fans want to see him display that killer skills and that executioner of a guy that he has shown in the past. And now that he is a champion fighting at a elite status in what is known to be one of the best divisions currently in the sport of boxing, people are expecting him to put on that killer performance as he has performed in the past. And he's not doing that versus guys like other champions like a Lomachenko, Baranchik, Tank Davis, or a top contender like a Maxie Hughes, George Gambosis, William Zepeda, and etc., etc. And Artem Harutyunyan, he isn't ranked amongst the top 10 contenders according to the major title sanctioning bodies, and it's only the WBC where they recognize Artem Harutyunyan as a top 10 contender, hence how Harutyunyan was able to get this fight versus Shakur Stevenson. And in Harutyunyan's last fight, before fighting Stevenson, was a decision loss versus Frank Martin, who is also still amongst the top contenders in the lightweight division, despite the fact that he had lost to Gervonta Davis in his most recent fight. And Harutyunyan, he didn't put up that much of a fight. He did throw a lot of punches, but those shots weren't meaningful, hence why Shakur Stevenson was able to put on the performance that he did versus Harutyunyan. And Shakur Stevenson, he displayed his attributes. He displayed his skills in this fight. He looked good in this fight. And Shakur Stevenson displayed those skills that a fighter of his style has the reputation of being able to display. So that's why I don't see how fans could be disappointed and critical of this performance versus Harutyunyan, because versus Artem Harutyunyan, he put on a clinic. And it was a one-sided dominant performance, and Harutyunyan wasn't giving up that much of a hard fight versus Stevenson for where it can be considered to be competitive. And Stevenson looked like as if he was in a sparring session, and it was target practice for Shakur Stevenson. Now, leading into this fight, it wasn't considered to be a mega fight, and truthfully speaking, it was more of a fight where Shakur Stevenson can stay busy and active and be consistent. With him being a champion, he doesn't want to be inactive, and especially with him facing a lot of criticism, this was his bounce back fight from that lackluster performance that he was criticized with versus Edwin De Los Santos. People were saying that Shakur Stevenson lose his edge. I don't think so, because Shakur Stevenson displayed all the skills that he's made a reputation out of. And Shakur Stevenson has the reputation of being a highly skilled fighter that has these good attributes, these good technical abilities that got him to be considered amongst the elites in boxing as a top head of the sport of boxing, as a well-recognizable face and name in the sport of boxing. And Shakur Stevenson, as I have said, he is still arguably the best lightweight in the top of the lightweights. And Shakur Stevenson, even though he didn't put on a dominant TKO victory in what was a display of a classic, slick, highly skilled technical boxer like a Vasily Lomachenko, like Lomachenko did versus Gambosis to win that IBF lightweight title. And he didn't put on a hard-fought victory displaying tremendous heart like a Baranchik did versus Navarrete, who Navarrete, even though it was his debut fight at lightweight, is a well-decorated, highly regarded, well-reckoned, well-noticed elite fighter in all of boxing. Nor did he score a highlight reel knockout like Gervonta Davis did in his last fight versus Frank Martin, who is still considered to be a top contender amongst the top of the lightweights. And that's why Shakur Stevenson now is in question when it comes to him being considered the best lightweights, because when comparing all these champions' last performances, Shakur Stevenson had the least impressive performance when compared to all the other champions at lightweight. And Shakur Stevenson is now a free agent when it comes to the promotional side of things. And Shakur Stevenson had turned down the offer that was offered to him from Top Rank for 5 fights, and it was for a lucrative $15 million. And Stevenson had rejected and turned down that offer from Top Rank, making him a free agent. Now, we've seen Shakur Stevenson with Floyd Mayweather, who works closely with PBC, and there could be a mega potential fight with Stevenson and Gervonta Davis, because Gervonta Davis works with PBC when it comes to the promotional side of things. And we have the current WBA champion Gervonta Davis and the current WBC champion Shakur Stevenson, who are the most well-recognizable names when it comes to the lightweight division, the most marketable names when it comes to the lightweight division. And I could confidently say that. And Vasily Lomachenko is also up there as well because Lomachenko, he's been a staple name amongst the top of the lightweights for a while now. And now that he's back as a champion in the lightweight division, and the reputation Lomachenko is known for makes him a draw. And I can say that Shakur Stevenson is more of a draw, at least in America, because Shakur Stevenson is an American fighter and he has the personality where fans can gravitate towards more to a personality like a Shakur Stevenson than a Vasily Lomachenko, who has built a reputation for his skills more than his reputation. And Shakur Stevenson has made a reputation from both his skills and his personality as well. And he's more communicative than a Vasily Lomachenko is. That's why Shakur Stevenson is considered to be more of a marketable fighter than a Lomachenko. And that's why that fight with Stevenson and Davis would be considered more of a mega fight than a Stevenson versus Lomachenko or a Lomachenko versus Tank Davis. And then there is Baranchyk as well, who's the current WBO lightweight champion. And Baranchyk, he had just recently got himself a reputation of being a well-reckoned name amongst all of boxing and not just the lightweight division, because before this he was considered to be a top contender in the lightweight division, but not many people knew of Baranchyk. And when Baranchyk got himself that victory that many people counted him out of prior to that fight versus Navarrete, and for him to come out on top now has catapulted Baranchyk to be a reputable name amongst the lightweight division, which is considered to be one of the most paid attention to divisions in the sport of boxing right now. And that still doesn't mean he has the reputation that a Gervonta Davis or Shakur Stevenson or a Vasily Lomachenko has, but it still has a guy like Baranchyk in the talks of things when it comes to big fights that are possible to be made in the future in the lightweight division. And a title unification bout is never a bad look. And promotionally speaking, now that Shakur Stevenson is a free agent and he's been seen with PBC fighters outside of the ring, and that could be signs to hint at Shakur Stevenson, now that he's a free agent, that for his next fight he could be working with PBC. And it's more likely now that he had turned down the offer that was offered to him from Top Rank. And for Top Rank now, the next fight that would be most lucrative for their promotion would be a title unification bout between two Ukrainian champions, Vasily Lomachenko and Denis Baranchyk. And that would be for the IBF and WBO lightweight titles. And then if Shakur Stevenson does decide to work with PBC, then PBC can make that big money fight happen with Gervonta Davis and Shakur Stevenson and make it a all in-house fight that is worked only with PBC. And then that will be for the WBA and WEC lightweight titles. And the winner of those two respective fights can fight each other to see who's going to be undisputed at lightweight. And Shakur Stevenson, after his not so well received performances versus Edwin De Los Santos and Artem Harutyunyan, how is he gonna do versus better names like Gervonta Davis, Vasily Lomachenko, Dennis Baranchyk? The odds aren't looking good for Shakur Stevenson versus those guys because of how he performed versus lesser quality opponents, and I say that with all due respect. And Shakur Stevenson, as I have said, he still has the ability to display those skills that he has earned his reputation from. And with that being said, Shakur Stevenson is still a elite champion in the lightweight division and as well as all of boxing. And if he does decide to fight any of the other champions at lightweight, he is still gonna be a threat to his opponent. And Shakur Stevenson, if he doesn't fight a champion in his next fight, he can fight a top contender like a Maxie Hughes, a William Zepeda, who is unbeaten and is the #1 ranked contender according to all the major title sanctioning bodies. And then there is George Gambosis as well. And there is Emmanuel Navarrete if he decides to stick around at lightweight. And Shakur Stevenson, to have a fight versus a guy like George Gambosis, Emmanuel Navarrete, William Zepeda, Maxie Hughes, who's worked with Top Rank, and now that Shakur Stevenson had turned down that contract offer from Top Rank, it's most likely that Stevenson isn't going to work with Top Rank for his next fight. Then that means those fights are more likely not to happen. And if Shakur Stevenson does decide to work with PBC, it's more likely to make that big money fight happen with him and Tank Davis. And Shakur Stevenson, as I have said, he displayed his elite skills such as his movement, ring generalship, his speed, his ability to fight from any range, his ability to control the angle, and good footwork, good positioning, consistent rhythm, and consistent work rate. And that has what made Shakur Stevenson what he is today, a elite fighter. And that's why Shakur Stevenson has the reputation that he has. And as I have said, now that a lot of fans are considering Shakur Stevenson to be boring, I don't know if they're trying to take that notoriety away from Shakur Stevenson to make him look not as good as he has built himself to be and has earned himself the reputation of having. And Shakur Stevenson, other than the first 2 rounds where he was just moving around the ring and utilizing his foot and backpedaling, that was to warm up his legs, and that was for him to loosen up. And when he got into the groove of things, to sort of say, it was all Stevenson, and he put on a dominant, classic, clinical of a performance versus Artem Harutyunyan. And I don't know if fans were expecting Stevenson to get a knockout win, a TKO stoppage, or where it was so one-sided, where Artem Harutyunyan couldn't take more punishment from Shakur Stevenson, where him or his corner throws in the towel for Shakur Stevenson to get a TKO stoppage win, where those shots from Stevenson would be too much for Harutyunyan to handle, and that wasn't the case, and Harutyunyan was on backpedal mode, and whenever he would throw, and he did throw consistently throughout the fight, but as I had said, those weren't meaningful enough shots for Shakur Stevenson to back off of him and not walk him down. And that does it for this post-fight video, y'all. If y'all like this video, click the like button, hit the share button, and subscribe to this channel. And click the links in the description to show y'all support for this channel and all the content that I provide through this channel. And that's it. I'm done and I'm out of here, y'all. Be good and peace.